Mr. Lampert, we're on a podcast together again.
We are.
This has become a bit of a habit, mate. You've been to really good conferences lately.
Not as good as the last one. That New York trip. Wow, that was something else.
Yeah, I thought you might have been to a really good IP paralegal conference over the last couple of days.
Oh, I did go to. Yeah, the compare was quite wild.
Wasn't he that award-winning chief executive bloke?
He doesn't like to talk about it.
No, absolutely not. Thanks for joining me. This is quite an exciting one, isn't it? Because we're going to talk about CPTPP, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Which obviously rolls off the tongue so well, having rehearsed it for the best part of 3 years now.
It's an important story, one that some of our members, well, hopefully all of our members will be aware of what we achieved with the help of our guests.
You didn't tell me we've got guests. Who have you got lined up? Oh, I'll tell you what. So let me tell the story of the start of CPTPP and then we'll bring them in, yeah?
Do it.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
So this goes back to early 2020, doesn't it? I think that's when this all kicked off for us. And we were just in the early days of the pandemic. And I remember we'd been conscious of the fact that the UK was likely to try and join the CPTPP for some time. And CIPA Council had discussed that and had concerns about certain elements of the CPTPP IP provisions and how they might sort of not align with the European Patent Convention. So it was on the radar, but then the announcement came that the UK was going to look to accede to CPTPP. And I remember we were in a meeting with the officers, and they asked a question, didn't they? It was like, well, what should we do? You know, we're going to need to actually put some money into this and do some campaigning here. Who do we approach? And I didn't know, but I am very friendly with the chief executive of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, Alistair McCaffrey. And I sent him a little text while we were talking, and he immediately replied back to me saying, Ian Anderson, Cicero, he's your man. And I think you then immediately got on the email, didn't you? You then immediately flicked an email off to Ian. He got terribly excited by it all. It was like, oh, this sounds like really interesting. And we forged a partnership with Cicero. And this is really the story of that partnership and how it worked. And we've got two Cicero people on. So let's get them to introduce themselves. Claudia, let's go with you first. Claudia, who are you?
Hello, lovely to be here. Thank you for having us. My name is Claudia Mulholland. I have been working now with Cicero for a couple of years and had a great relationship with Neil and Lee and kind of other members of the CIPA team throughout that period of time working on the CPTPP campaign. I guess by way of background, I'm a public affairs professional, so I help clients like CIPA and other membership organisations, big firms, to kind of navigate relationships with government.
Pleasure to have you on, Claudia. And Dan, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Likewise, Claudia, great to be on the podcast. Likewise, Claudia, I've worked with you guys throughout this campaign since we started working a couple of years ago on the start of CPTPP. And similar to Claudia, I work across sort of professional services and with firms and membership organisations right across sectors actually as well, helping them sort of navigate parliaments and with governments and sort of get their message heard with the people that they want to be meeting and building relationships with. So that was what we did with you guys.
Cool. And I think it goes without saying that you're very good at it because we succeeded. And I don't think we would have succeeded if we didn't have your sort of guidance and counsel and expertise. So thanks for all you did. Now, I think a great place to start might be to have a little conversation about the niche world that we live in and how difficult that must have been for our Cicero colleagues to kind of get to grips with that fairly early on. So
Agreed, yeah.
I think IP law is a pretty specialist place. So how did you find coming to work with us? The thing I was most impressed with is that you, and maybe this is just because of the world you inhabit and you need to learn these things quickly, sort of move at pace. It didn't take you long at all to absolutely understand us, to understand the environment we operated in, to talk our language. And that was the most impressive thing for me. How'd you do that?
I'd say, Lee, we're pretty used to working with clients who are navigating kind of technical problems in technical environments. So I think kind of at the heart of what we do is kind of getting into a problem really, really quickly and being able to distill that down into terms that work for the people that we're speaking to, so that work for the politicians, the government stakeholders, the civil servants. So I think, coming in to speak to you, listening to your problems, it was about really kind of understanding what's the crux of the issue, what are the things that we need to know in order to be able to kind of sell that story to the people that need to know it, and kind of all kind of the key decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'd add to that is that if we didn't understand the issue and really do the heavy lifting at the beginning of the campaign, then we wouldn't have been very good at advising you on who we needed to meet in the first place. I think that's the way I would characterise it.
That absolutely makes sense.
I think that took a bit of time as well. I think you're right to say that, Lee. It was a bit of a challenge on our side to take some heavy lifting to get to grips with it. But as Claudia says, we do have lots of expertise across sort of highly regulated markets in different sectors, from healthcare to financial and professional services, and in the legal sector as well. Previously, other team members have worked in and around that. But for us, it was Claudia and myself, it was our first time specifically in the legal sector. But it's definitely something that we've benefited from and loved doing throughout the campaign, and it was a really sort of beneficial process for us as well to get involved.
And I guess that Wellstar world is pretty niche, intellectual property, particularly when we started talking about stuff like grace periods and patent term adjustment and the
EPC.
the techie stuff that we live with all the time, and just expect everyone else to understand, and actually it's quite difficult. I'm guessing that there are actually some elements to this that are about that it's just about, this is leading edge government policy stuff, it's trade, it's negotiations, and that's bread and butter. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the trade agenda more broadly is something I think we're probably more comfortable with, and something that kind of lots of parliamentary stakeholders are more comfortable talking about. So I guess it's about kind of pulling out the elements of this that were kind of easy, the friendly face of the issue that we were talking about, and kind of using that as a kind of a gateway into more complicated conversations, but identifying the bits that you're talking about that were easy for people to engage with, kind of on an initial level.
Neil, have you got any insights that you want to share?
I just think back to when we first started working with the Cicero team, and we were meeting on a weekly basis, weren't we?
We were,
and
yeah.
It was impressive the way you guys really hit the ground running, and you got me running off, building up case studies of patent-rich sort of clients around the country to use with various MPs. So you kept me busy, all right. But it was impressive, and we knew immediately that we were in great hands, didn't we? Didn't we, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're confident right from the off. Confident in terms of the partnership that we had and the way we were working together. Not so confident that we would actually do it.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Secretly, and Neil knows this, I always thought we would, because I thought it was such a compelling story, and that government would have to listen to us. But
I think sometimes, though, just to jump in, Lee, sorry, just to jump in on that.
Yeah,
I think sometimes, because we felt that as well, that we did have a compelling case to make. But often, when you outside of your working life, you can believe in something and have a passion for something and see the right thing should be done. And often, as we know in life, these things don't work out how you want to. So I think it was we were certainly at risk at the start of sort of, just believing ourselves in the powerful nature of our case. And I think we had to make sure it continued in the sort of 2-year campaign that we were always sort of referring back to why it was so important to the UK, and some of the messaging that we can come to that we developed throughout, and why it was so important to the profession more broadly.
What do you think were the most critical sort of interventions, if you like? Which bits of the campaign were crucial, key?
I think we made some really good relationships with kind of important allies. And I know, Neil, you were very instrumental in forming really strong relationships with the Department for International Trade, the negotiating team there, kind of the key civil servants. Kind of obviously is the base level line. That's kind of those are the relationships you want to be kind of building and maintaining. But I think where we really did well, and kind of a key turning point for our campaign from my perspective, was getting on board all of those kind of key allies across the Commons, across the Lords, not necessarily government stakeholders, people on the opposition benches, people on various select committees. That's, I think, where we really did well in kind of building up that kind of strong base of support that you don't necessarily just get from sitting back and sitting your hands and doing nothing. We had to work for that, I think. But I think that really made the difference, and meant that we had people pushing our cause with government, even when we weren't in the room with government having the conversations.
I think I've met more MPs and peers in the last 2 years than I'll ever want to meet again in my lifetime.
Lots of trips to Portcullis House.
It was more than 30, wasn't it? You saw in the end.
Yeah, more than 30. That's enough, isn't it? That's enough. I think for me, one of the interesting things was how we did. It was never political, was it? This wasn't about us making a statement about the pros and cons politically of acceding to CPTPP. It was simply about saying, if you do this, these are the consequences for the UK, for UK businesses, for UK sort of innovation economy, and at the end of the day, for our members.
Absolutely.
And I think it was important that we got our facts and our hard evidence all sorted out.
We had a stroke of luck there because we commissioned with the IP Federation for Tony Clayton, former chief economist at the UK IPO, to do some research and some benchmarking for us, unrelated to CPTPP at the time. It was more to do about perhaps a future US trade deal. And Tony came up with some really compelling facts and figures, didn't he, about the value of the EPC to the UK economy.
Yeah. We were able to say, weren't we, that the profession's worth £1 billion gross value added to the economy.
Yeah.
Which was a really powerful, useful figure to talk to MPs and peers about. And
over 3/4 of that is rooted in the EPC. And if you take 3/4 of a profession's work away, the other quarter doesn't stand up either, does it? You lose a lot. And that was the risk, really.
So I'm interested in how important Cicero colleagues think it was to have that evidence to hand right from the start.
Just essential to the campaign. I mean, as you said, Neil, like we were sending you off on the virtual tour of the country, sort of pinging off emails to your members on the value of the work they're doing in the regions where we were sort of seeking meetings with MPs and respective stakeholders from across the country. But actually, in terms of who made the decisions on the government side, if we were sort of knocking on the door with individual MP case studies, as we were doing, we needed a bigger number and case to make as well. And I think we managed to straddle both very well throughout the campaign. I think it definitely helped in getting it endorsed by the committees as well. In Parliament, we had several endorsements, if you like, through the reports that the International Trade Committee wrote. That's in the House of Commons. So it's a cross-party group of MPs that endorsed basically our ask in the CPTPP. And similarly, we had the representative committee in the House of Lords, the International Agreements Committee, similarly endorse our campaign. And I think we can say we would have got that endorsement without that sort of collateral that Lee had beforehand, that actually it might have been a bit of a harder ask to do that without sort of having that real sort of case to make that actually we're patent attorneys across the UK make a real impact and we need to be heard throughout this negotiation.
Goes back to our first point, doesn't it? You know, MPs might not want to engage kind of on the technical side of this point, but money talks. And I think when you can throw out a number at them, and the risk associated with what we could have lost, that's where they really became engaged. So I think if you've got, a cold hard stats, that was really useful. Speaking of the select committees, though, we've got to talk about Lee's starring role at the International Trade Committee on the panel.
You're so kind.
That was a turning point, I would say.
He doesn't normally like to talk about that, Claudia.
Oh, go on, let's talk about it.
It was it was a fascinating experience. I don't know whether it was easier because it was done remotely, by video conference, or whether it would have been easier to actually go into Parliament and do it. So I've got no comparison, but it was interesting doing it remotely because you can't judge body language and all of those kinds of things. So for me, it was, and I think where you really added value there was the couple of rehearsals we did beforehand. So it was, you're going to get asked lots of questions, but you're going to make 3 points and you're going to make them over and over again. And it's about the financial impact. It's about the potential threat to our innovative economy. And it's actually about the UK maintaining its existing international obligations. And if you get your head around, it's just a series of bit like if you do a sort of a television interview or such, isn't it? I've done enough media training to know that you have your kind of 3 key messages and you just try and bring the questions back to them all the time. I found that quite easy to do, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, consistency of message is key. I think that's what we'd say to all of our clients, whatever the sector, whatever the problem, as long as you're on message throughout and you're not kind of throwing in wild suppositions, you're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting what you were saying earlier about, you had a good feeling that we would help the government to actually pull this off from quite a long way out.
Well, it's not. It's
It
not
was
the first
never
time.
really. I mean, anything could have happened, really, couldn't it? In terms of it, this is such an important deal for the government to land that. I mean, we were never really sure.
It's not the first time I've been involved in something this important, really. I mean, it was I can't remember when it was now, 2004 to 2007, when I was working in further education and campaigned for further education teachers to get qualified teacher status, which we did, again, against the backdrop of being told that it was probably not possible to do because it would be resisted by the school side of the education system. And, in that campaign, I thought from right early on, this is such a great story that it's got to succeed. And so I guess the confidence came from, I've been in this position before. There was no existential threat relating to that one. It was like trying to get something that didn't already exist, whereas this was trying to stop losing something that did already exist. It just, to my mind, it was how could you possibly put at risk probably one of the UK's most important features of its economy.
And another aspect of this, we couldn't really talk about what we were doing outside of our close-knit kind of secret circle, could we?
Yeah.
So we'd often hear very senior lawyers talking about, well, obviously we're going to have to leave the EPC because the government's going to join the CPTPP, and we'd have to just sit on our hands and frustratingly, have to sit by and listen to all this stuff. So clearly lots of people didn't believe that we were going to pull it off.
I think as well in the political environment, just to come from our side of things as well, this was a real set piece for the government. We talked to you guys throughout the campaign about the stalled, if we like, UK-US trade deal. CPTPP, when it was concluded, or even just going back to when it started, the government has consistently been saying it's the biggest post-Brexit trade deal that the UK has done or acceded to. And really, we could have been swept away if our voice wasn't heard in this issue. I think is such an all-encompassing trade deal. The benefit for the government to say to UK investors, international investors, and elsewhere is that it covers agriculture, it covers life sciences. It's all these things, and actually the government wanted to get it done quite swiftly, and that definitely posed a risk to us. And I think because we made our voice heard quite early on in proceedings and got this technical quirk of the agreement heard through the right channels and through the right people at the start, I think we did ourselves a good service that ultimately led to a good result.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that we had reassurances from the government along the way, didn't we? I don't think we went into the final throes of the agreement process, the accession process, kind of totally in the dark. We had good commitments from government. I think was it back in 2021, the summer of 2021. So I think kind of throughout we were quietly confident, it's fair to say, but just had to keep plugging away just on the off chance the winds changed.
Absolutely. They were very, very consistent in their insistence that they would respect their international obligations, the government, weren't they?
Absolutely.
I think it's fair to say, and I don't think this is contentious, it was at a time when the government wasn't actually renowned for always delivering on its international obligations. So whilst we were hearing that, and it was good to hear that, I think you had to receive that against the backdrop of things can change quite quickly and you can't take that sort of messaging for granted. Great to hear, but that doesn't mean you take your foot off the pedal.
I think that's very
Absolutely.
fair.
We never did. We really never did. We really tried to keep our foot on the pedal all the way throughout the campaign. You're definitely right about that, Lee.
It was a time of huge political change. I think in the period, the 2-year period that we worked together, did we have 3 prime ministers or two, if not 3?
No, 3.
Like
we had 3.
Winds can change. I mean, obviously they were adaptive prime ministers. They were all looking for kind of post-Brexit trade wins. But like you say, kind of the ins and outs of what that looks like at a technical level, there was scope for that. There was opportunity for it to change.
And I think if we really drill down to it as well, we had several different, Lee's gone and Lee and Neil have gone through, I'm sure, several more IP ministers than we've had in our campaign of 2 years. But we had a couple of IP ministers. We had several. I think one week we had a couple, maybe 2 or 3 different trade ministers. So we really had to sort of navigate that and had to carry on building relationships from the next minister to the next and keeping our voice heard. And it was quite a challenge, but I think we did a good job.
Yeah,
We had that crazy period at the end of the campaign where the department that we had been liaising with was the Department for International Trade, which just left like 6 weeks before the final agreement, suddenly became the Department for Business and Trade, and all of the email addresses changed, and no one really knew who was on business, who was on trade, who we had been talking to, where they were, how you get in touch with them. There was that crazy period where it was all just kind of all over the place.
We knew we'd landed our messages properly when we heard that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, could explain what a grace period was.
Amazing, wasn't it, when we were told that?
What a win.
We said right at the start that if we didn't achieve this, our success would be getting it on the desk of the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
That would mean that we could have done no more. We did it.
Absolutely.
Neil, I want to bring you in a minute about the international stuff, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things just to flesh out the whole story. One of our challenges here, of course, was if we were looking at a bilateral trade deal, you start from a blank piece of paper. Nothing exists. You negotiate stuff out and you negotiate stuff in. And we're certainly going to need to do that when it comes to perhaps future conversations with the US and wherever it might be. But you are starting from a position that everything is on the table. The issue we had here, of course, was you've got an existing pact with 11 member states in it who are quite proud and precious about the agreement that they've co-created, and don't particularly want someone to come storming in saying, well, we like this bit, but we don't like that bit. I think that's why this has been such a huge achievement, because it would have been so easy for the other 11 members to say, no, you play by our rules or you don't come in. And also, therefore, for the UK government to say it's so important that we're in, we roll over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got it. The fact that Claudia and I were discussing actually before we came on and spoke to you guys today, that the fact that we've effectively got it baked in as part of the UK's accession, it was essentially the gold standard for us at the start of the campaign. Better than anything we could have expected, like you say, Lee. So I think it's testament to our work. But testament to Neil's work. Working with these counterparts across the globe. I'm sure.
You need to blow your trumpet a wee bit, mate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant work.
Well, we don't truly know how influential it was talking to those stakeholders and IP organisations in the CPTPP countries, but we've been told by colleagues in government that they haven't directly told us how important it was, but they've certainly given us an indication that it was very important. And we should really thank our colleagues, particularly in New Zealand, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Canada, and in Japan, who gave us time, listened to us, set out our position, explain why we felt it was actually in their interest and in the interests of IP-rich innovators in their countries that the UK had to remain in the EPC. And we're grateful to those organisations that helped raise our positions with the governments in those CPTPP states. I mean, I was
truly international campaign.
Yeah, it was exciting to be working on that level, really, and to achieve what we did.
And also, of course, and again, we couldn't talk about it, with the EPO. So we were having conversations with the EPO because central to all of this and the position that we suggested that the UK negotiators should aim for would be where we've ended up, which is that the UK is a member of the CPTPP with the grace period provisions set aside until such time as there is broader global harmonisation around the grace period and other patent law harmonisation. So we had to have those conversations with the EPO, but they had to happen sort of behind closed doors. So frustrating that you can't tell people what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that was a frustration all along, but there we are. That's the nature of negotiations, isn't it?
So I've got a bit of a killer question for Dan and Claudia. It's only a killer question because it's being asked of me. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
It's not like the questions I normally drop in at the end of a normal podcast, Neil. This is all related and relevant. Don't worry. Okay. Normally I'll drop in some horrible tangential thing that throws people. This isn't my intent this time round. So we did a CPTPP session at a recent CEPA Congress. So that's getting our members together to listen to the story. We had Bobby Mukherjee there representing the IP Federation. And we had Sarah Roberts-Faval there representing, she's moved on now, hasn't she, Neil? But she was there in her role as one of the negotiator team, and very pleased to have her there. So we had a really good panel. And right at the end, so Catriona Hammer, member of the team that was working on CPTPP, was chairing the panel. And she asked a question that I'm going to ask of you two. So she said, if you did it again, if you had to do it again, is there anything you would do differently? So go on and get your thinking caps on. Is there anything you think, we could have done that slightly differently, or we could have done that better, or whatever it might be?
While you're thinking, I will
Yeah.
just say, I'm not sure if your audio glitched there, Lee, but that's Sarah Roberts-Favell, who was working for the DBT at the time, the Department for Business and Trade.
I think I dropped out. Yeah,
International Trade.
Yeah.
So we're grateful to her for speaking at Congress.
Yeah, you've had a bit of thinking time now, so
I bought you some time,
No
guys.
pressure.
I'll tell you what I think. I think ultimately we got where we wanted to go. So I'm not disappointed with anything we did. I don't have any regrets or things I think I would have done differently because we got the outcome we wanted. I think if we were doing it again now, the strategy that we would have proposed to you would have been slightly different. We find ourselves in different political times now. We're coming up to an election. The polls are different. The Conservative government finds itself in a much weaker position than it did this time 2 years ago when we first started working together. I think if we were doing it again now, if we were starting from scratch, we would have to think much more seriously about what a Labour government would do, how they would continue those negotiations and how we would engage with the Labour government or kind of a prospective Labour government in the run-up to an election to push the campaign forward. But looking back at how we did it, I think we did well. We got the outcome we would have hoped for.
Yeah, there wasn't anything that immediately sprung to mind. It sounds like I'm sitting on the fence here and patting ourselves on the back. But I think throughout the campaign we had a number of like inflection points that sort of worked well for us. Lee going in front of the committee's endorsements of our ask, and I think we really sort of built our relationships early. That meant we had a sort of a consistent drumbeat of engagement, and I think if we hadn't got that, then there'd have been something I'd been concerned about. But I think when we brought you guys on and started working together, I think the feeling from your side was obviously that because it was such a existential crisis for you, you wanted to go in and speak to the ministers responsible and everyone and anyone who was willing to speak to us. And we felt that, but I think from building from like the bottom up, if you like, and getting our platform heard through numbers of officials and parliamentarians and peers really sort of was definitely something that was worthwhile for us in the long run of the campagin. So I haven't given you a failure.
It's about as good an answer as I gave at Congress. So.
What did you say, Lee?
I can't remember, but it was along those lines. I think I might have said that sort of with hindsight, perhaps we would have started slightly earlier, because I think we did wait until there was an announcement, and then we kind of geared up. Maybe if we'd had a conversation with you a couple of months earlier about there's this thing, it might happen. We may have been slightly more geared up for it and sort of hit the ground running, but I think we did anyway. So
yeah, absolutely.
We also knew for about 6 weeks that we'd done it, and we couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
You
couldn't even really tell us, could you?
No, we didn't.
No.
And I don't think we broke that confidence at all. We didn't do anything at all.
No, not at all.
Other than saying, I think we were told, the one thing that we were told that we could say if we were asked questions is that people were unlikely to be disappointed with the outcome. I think that was about as much as we could say.
Yeah, I think that's what you had told us as well.
Yeah.
There was 11th hour stuff, and it wasn't anything to do with IP that kept knocking the agreement back and back and back. Yeah, because we were ready to go with Neil, weren't we, with comms? We were all ready to go, and it's like, no, it's not happening this week now. So. Neil, you got anything else you want to add, mate?
No, just
this is your podcast, really.
As well as being like, it almost sounds a bit trite to say it, but a kind of career highlight. It was just good fun working with you guys.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we really did. It was something different. I can certainly speak for Claudia and myself. For us, it was real sort of campaigny type issue that we hadn't certainly done beforehand. And I love working with you guys, and great fun you were. I know it was such a serious issue for you and the team there and your members, but I think we tackled it with good grace. Yeah.
What I remember most is the very first meeting with Ian, which was a Zoomy thing, and he stands up a lot, doesn't he, when he has meetings? And he was so excited. He genuinely was so excited.
He loves to get stuck in.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's not every day in our line of work that you get an issue that you can really get your teeth into and that there's scope for you to win on. A lot of the time, conversations are slow, it's kind of incremental change. It's conversations taking place over 5-10 years. But it was quick. It was an issue that was kind of, I know, technical, but kind of easy for us to get engaged in quite quickly, like you said. And it was an easy one to sell and to pitch to stakeholders. So yeah, it was fun.
You're making it sound easy, Claudia.
It was a piece of cake.
Far from that.
It was far from that, but it was real classic public affairs work. And although we are public affairs professionals, Claudia and myself, sometimes we wouldn't do what we consider classic public affairs work. We might do what we could be considered public relations or corporate reputation management, or lots of other things that you can describe it. But this was really getting our voice heard across the political divide, and we love doing it.
Oh, well, I think we've probably arrived at a natural conclusion, Neil, haven't we?
I think so.
Oh, thank you both for coming on. And it's been a while since we've probably caught up, so it's just lovely to speak to you, but also obviously to speak in a celebratory way about what we achieved, which was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the best thing is that we've had several excuses for a party.
Yeah. We've not finished yet.
Right?
Yeah.
We'll squeeze another one out, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will.
Yes.
Thanks both. Cheers, Neil, for making this happen, mate. Appreciate it.
That's all.
Thank you.